Welcome back to Earth Station Trek, a show where we trek from the early days on NBC to the future on Paramount Plus and everywhere in between. I'm Charles Kelso, and it's my privilege to introduce the Earth Station Trek crew, Alan Seiler.
Aye, aye, Captain.
And Veronica Dashel.
Hi.
And I almost said Keith Johnson, even though he's not here. I can see that he's not on the screen. Keith
is ever present.
That's right. He's on an away mission this week, but he's never far from our hearts.
Indeed.
Well, welcome back, everybody. We're here talking about Star Trek yet again.
Amazing.
Go figure.
We've been talking about Star Trek for 4.5 years now.
Yeah,
Almost 4.5 years.
Yeah, we haven't run out of things to talk about yet.
We haven't. It's amazing.
Not even close.
Well, it helps that they keep giving us things to talk about because
that is true. Like
recently,
when producers say stupid things like they did this week.
That they do. They do. Recently, Akiva Goldsman was talking about the end of Strange New Worlds, and he mentioned, hey, why not just continue into the original series? And it's something along those lines. He's like, we already have the sets. Why not? And that got us thinking about what if they continued on from Strange New Worlds and did a remake of the original series. And what does that mean? Like, is it still like what's canon for one? Is it a good idea? Is it something they should do? What might be different? How might the producers of Strange New Worlds approach the original series era? So we thought it'd be a good thing to dive into tonight.
Yeah, it's a really crazy idea because they are clearly building toward the original series era by gradually adding more and more legacy characters. And eventually we'll have a whole cast of original characters in place. I mean, we've still got 2.5 seasons to go on Strange New Worlds. So by the time we end, we're going to have pretty much all the players in place. So what do you do from that point? Do you just carry on? And if so, what does that mean for the original series and its placement in canon? Will something that they do now override something that was done? Because we've kind of, I'm going to speak on Keith's behalf right now, but they've kind of done that sort of thing with the Gorn.
Right.
What we have now is essentially an overwrite of what had already been stated and shown in the original series. So how much more of that can be done?
Yeah, because they hand waved a few other things, like
oh, yeah.
Kirk appearing earlier and T'Pring being around and stuff like that.
Oh yeah,
and those things are just like, okay, fine, whatever. But
to you,
okay, to me. But even I know that the Gorn is. I mean, like when people think of Star Trek, they think of the guy in the rubber suit fighting Kirk. That's the layperson picture of Star Trek and Spock.
Okay.
But so to me, that's a bigger issue.
Well, the Gorn is a huge thing because it was, I mean, a big part of, the Arena, which is the original Gorn episode, was that it was his first contact with the Gorn, right? It's like one of the famous first contacts from Star Trek. So yeah, I mean, rewriting the Gorn is a big deal, but also something like T'Pring, like the T'Pring and Spock from Strange New Worlds is not compatible with the T'Pring, in my opinion, with the T'Pring and Spock from the original series. And there's a lot of things about Strange New Worlds that over the course of the first 2 seasons, I mean, we've only watched 20 episodes of Strange New Worlds, but I mean, in that time, there's a lot of stuff that to me is incompatible with the original series. So I think because the original series is my favorite TV show of all time. And so I think I would have had a more negative reaction before watching Strange New Worlds than I do now, because Strange New Worlds has sort of created its own version of the 23rd century.
Yeah.
And it is, I mean, it's already not compatible to me with the original series. And so to me, I think I'm a little more willing to see the Strange New Worlds producers version of the original series now than I would have been in 2021, for instance, because the original series was gospel. You know what I mean? I'm still mad at Enterprise for things that aren't compatible with the original series. And that show was 20 years ago.
Poor Enterprise. It'll never catch a break.
But I'm curious, Veronica, what do you think? Because you probably have the least history and emotional attachment to the original series than any of us here.
I mean, I can see them doing it, and I can see fans both being excited and being super pissed. But that's Star Trek fans in general. I feel like there's probably going to be more of the middle ground on this than there would have been before, like you were saying. But I also think there's going to be people that came in with the Strange New Worlds cast for whatever reason, if they were coming in for one of the actors, like any of the girls who watched Vampire Diaries, if they came over because of that, they might be more accepting of continuing on with Enterprise, Kirk's Enterprise.
Well, there are a lot of people who find, especially younger viewers, I think, who find the original series painfully dated, both technologically and stylistically and socially. You know, I have a hard time watching the original series for those reasons. And I started watching it when I was like 10 years old.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that are easier for me to take, I think, than someone who's watching it fresh now. But I mean, for those people, then maybe watching a new version of Kirk and Spock in the Enterprise that's more in line with, you know, the 21st century or 2020s version of, you know, social progress and then just technologically. Like, there's some folks that find the matte paintings silly and the cyclorama silly and things like that might like a newer version and a revisit of those stories.
Yeah. But, you know, we're all talking about Paramount Plus here.
Yeah.
And we're talking about, as we have many times in the past, how many of those people are going to find Star Trek?
Right.
Isn't Star Trek basically playing to its own audience?
Yeah,
I don't
that's the other
find that it's
problem.
right. So to kind of put it in a different context, you know, I grew up with the original series,
Right.
but I wasn't a fan. I didn't really watch it. I was consumed by Lost in Space and other things, and I never really watched the original series, and I didn't become a Trek fan until 1982, which was the movie era, and then into 1987, the Next Gen era, and that's really when I became, you know, rabid about the show. So for me, it would be like 20 or whatever years from now, someone saying, you know, we've got this prequel, and when it ends, it's going to end right at the beginning of Deep Space Nine. So we could just continue on and do Deep Space Nine again. And that would put a stake in my heart.
Right.
You know, I don't have the same.
Again.
I love the original series, but I don't have the same emotional attachment that Chuck and Keith do.
Right.
So for me, if they were to, and even Next Gen or Voyager or whatever, but for me, DS9 is, you know, when it comes to Trek, that's my passion.
Right.
If they were to kind of put that same plan into place and say, we've introduced, you know, recasts of Odo and Kira and Cisco, and now we're just going to carry on into the beginning of Deep Space Nine, I would be crushed. I would hate it.
I feel like there's so many more like stories that you can tell in the Federation, much less in the Star Trek universe. That why would you retell this story? You could do a parallel story.
The reason you would redo
with another
it
ship
is because IPs are moneymakers for Hollywood, or that's how they perceive it. And Kirk and Spock and the Enterprise are still the most famous things from Star Trek.
Yes.
And that's the reason they did the 2009, like the Kelvin verse, J.J. Abrams movies. And I mean, I can see the appeal of doing that again. I don't know. I think that there are opportunities, though, to approach it from a 21st century lens. The way storytelling has changed, serialization has changed. You have things in the original series, for instance, just due to the nature of episodic television in the 60s, where you could build out characters over multiple seasons or series or seasons, and things that were like one and done on the original series. And it's not uncommon for even in Next Gen or even in like TNG time frame or even DS9, where you have hugely impactful things happening to the characters that are never mentioned again. We were just recently talking about that with O'Brien with Hard Time, where he had this huge thing happen to him. It's never mentioned again. There's a lot of things like that in the original series where you could take, well, what if this villain or this antagonist was over multiple episodes? Or what if this, you know, impactful thing that happened to Kirk impacted him over multiple episodes? And that's something I think that a strength of Strange New Worlds is that they're able to do ongoing, they do episodic ongoing they do episodic stories week to week, but they have ongoing character arcs and I think that looking at the original series in that way might be an interesting thing to do.
And I think that that's the kind of the point, for me at least, of tonight's episode is to, because I think the knee-jerk reaction is to say, well, of course that's a stupid idea. Who the hell would want that? But I think it's our job to kind of look at it from all angles and find some positive spin on this, that if they were to do it, what could be done with it? What would be good about it?
Right.
I think
we
one
might
of the
have to do some digging.
I think one of the things that they really, really need to do to build up the fan base of Star Trek and not make it an echo chamber is make it available streaming with advertisements, like heavy advertisements, but you don't have to pay a subscription fee.
Sure. Yeah. But
yeah,
we can go down a rabbit hole of how they should distribute Star Trek. But I mean, looking at the original series, we've got a little taste of how the Strange New Worlds producers might approach the original series with the season 1 finale, Quality of Mercy, which essentially is a remake of Balance of Terror, where they're telling the same story. In this case, it was because, if Pike was still the captain of the Enterprise, but we get to see a lot of the events of the original series as told by the Strange New Worlds producers and how it might be different. And I mean, I guess, like, I don't know. Does anybody want to lead off with, like, what is something from the original series that you feel like could have been or would be different with the Strange New Worlds producers?
Operation Annihilate.
Okay. Okay.
Well, that's interesting. That's actually good, but go ahead.
Yeah.
I mean, I just remember it was a weird episode, and I liked the scenery that was there.
I thought you were gonna say the flying pancakes.
But I would like to see what they do with flying pancakes.
Well, the interesting thing about Operation Annihilate is that's the episode where George Kirk died.
Right.
And we've gotten to know George.
Let's do that.
Right. Like that's something that would directly tie in with Strange New Worlds, because you've got George Kirk on this colony with his wife and his kids. And I mean, in the original series, that's a good example, because Kirk shows up and we discover he has a brother for the first time. Well, not the first time. It's been mentioned on the show before. But we meet him for the first time as a dead corpse.
As a dead guy.
Right. But I mean, what would Operation Annihilate be, knowing George Kirk now the way we know on Strange New Worlds?
How old was his kid in that?
12-ish.
So this is at least 12 years after the current.
No, I don't know that we know that George Kirk doesn't have a wife and kids somewhere.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
And besides, look what they did with Alexander on DS9. Age matters nothing at all, especially with children.
Right. Yeah, that's actually a pretty good one.
That is a good one.
It's also an example too. Like, you have this like space brain that we meet the cells of the space brain that are attacking. They're in this one episode. They're never seen again. Like, I mean, it's kind of like they're doing with the Gorn on Strange New Worlds. Is like you have this one episode alien that you could build out over multiple episodes or seasons.
Yeah. Here's a couple of comments just to get us started off. Mark says, New Trek trumps all over TOS. Introducing cloak ships in Discovery makes Kirk and Spock look like fools in the Balance of Terror episode when they are stunned to encounter a cloaked ship.
Now, giving blame where blame is due, Enterprise did it 20 years ago, 100 years before the original series.
That's true. That's the one that's the bigger crime, I think.
Right.
Wayne says, to be honest, I am highly intrigued to see how they are going to bring this show up to where TOS takes over.
Right.
I agree with that.
That's always one thing Ethan Peck has been saying, that they're working to get him from this point A to point Spock.
Right.
Point A to point Spock. That's cute.
Yes.
And then Mark also says Spock and Chapel's romance is far more advanced in Strange New Worlds. And then Christine pines away from afar in TOS. It doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like what may have happened there is Spock did the little switch and was like, I'm basically a Vulcan again. I'm not doing anything with human emotions. And she realized that, but she still pines for him. So she does it from afar to respect his boundaries.
Yeah.
Could be. Now, there's still 26 episodes of Strange New Worlds that we've not seen yet.
That's one whole season.
Right. So, I mean, there is ground for them to cover to get from A to B. Yep. But yeah, I mean, I think that, Spock and Chapel is a huge part of the original series that they're revisiting in Strange New Worlds. Now they're bringing in Roger Corby. I would like to see them bring in Layla Kalomi from This Side of Paradise, because she explicitly had almost a relationship or wanted a relationship with Spock 5 years ago that we never got to see. So I mean that'd be an interesting character to bring on Strange New Worlds. But as far as revisiting the original series goes, a character that I'd love to see revisited, and it's similar to way to Nurse Chapel. What they've done with Nurse Chapel, I think, is really interesting because she's a more interesting character than she was in the original series.
Agreed.
But you could do something better, I think, with Janice Rand.
Yes.
And a revisit of the original series than they did originally.
And you talk about a character that really needs that kind of like rehabilitation,
right?
That kind of story attention that
right.
she really, I mean, we don't really get that much of her in the original series. So there's plenty of room to do interesting things with her. And I think that that would be the ideal character to bring back.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lot of opportunities there because, for one, I mean, you could revisit what her job was for a start, because on the original series, she largely like was Kirk's secretary and made coffee and took notes and brought him his salad when it was lunchtime, you know. But I mean, you could revisit that and give her a more substantial, like, just job duty on the ship. But also, she had that, and like it was sort of implied that she had that relationship, not a relationship, but they didn't have a relationship, right? Like she was like the Miss Kitty or whatever. Like, she was. There was
who's going to get that reference, Chuck?
Right. But I mean, I think you could do a lot with that with her and Kirk. I don't know. Obviously, she got cut short on the original series. She was intended to be on it longer. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of opportunities there for her.
Absolutely. The question you posed was, if this were to happen, how do you think a modern version would be different than the original version? And my answer to that is we'll see a lot fewer space hippies.
That is true. That is true.
Anyway, that's just silliness.
I think that, I mean, on the Strange New Worlds version of the TOS characters that we've seen so far, they're sort of doing their own versions with. Right. Like, it's something I've complained about on the show is that, you know, Scotty is like a decade or more younger than Kirk and that sort of thing. So I think that they have some room to play with like a Sulu and a Bones and so forth. You know what I mean? And with Bones in particular, because you have that, I guess, non-canon backstory that DC Fontana had the idea of his daughter Joanna, and he was estranged from his ex-wife and daughter. And that's something that you could bring in if you were going to revisit Dr. McCoy on the original series and build out into something, right? And you mentioned the space hippies, like that was originally going to be Joanna, and it was going to be a story about Dr. McCoy's daughter having, you know, being involved with this youth movement or whatever and coming aboard the ship. They ended up writing it out, but you could actually do that. And I mean, I think there's a lot to be said today in 2025 about youth movements and older generations where you could do a better version of space hippies, you know?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's an interesting thing. I don't think I ever knew that about that little plot detail.
Right.
Well, let's see.
I also wonder what. Okay, go ahead with that.
I was just going to say, Mark chimed in and said that all of Enterprise is just a hollow novel played by Riker.
Yeah, it's not real.
It is all real.
I wonder what they would do with the Horta if they got to that point.
Because the Horta is a character that, not a character, but a species that I would have expected like Lower Decks or something. Like, I'm surprised no one has done Horta yet, but that'd be cool.
Well, yeah, I would like to have seen Disco, or maybe, you know, coming up we have Starfleet Academy. Let's see where they are centuries down the road. Yeah, anybody could do them. Anyway, sorry.
No, you're fine. I know in the novels you have like Horta characters, and there was one that was like serving on the Enterprise.
That's right,
and things like that. Like, you could do cool things with the Horta.
That's right,
and that's a good pull, because like the whole thing about bringing back the Gorn or bringing back La'an, Nooney, and Singh is like they're grabbing onto like the iconic things from Star Trek.
Horta is one of the only ones they haven't used.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
I say that, and now watch it be in this next season.
I mean, I wouldn't love it because they don't discover the Horta for like 5 more years. Yes. But if you're revisiting the original series era And I would love to see like an ongoing storyline involving the Horta. Like what happens to them.
Like they just skip the episode where they discover the Horta because it's already been done, and then they're having the after effects of they discovered the Horta and now they have a Horta.
But I feel like if they were redoing the original series, they wouldn't be skipping things. They would just redoing them.
I know.
No,
I'm trying to be idealistic.
Now, what about the idea of and I know this isn't the intent of what Akiva said, because he's talking about how we already have all the sets built. But what about a series? You could still do it. A series that's set on a different ship that's concurrent with Enterprise. The thing is, there you have all your characters in place, but you're not going to use them. You're going to be doing a completely different set of characters.
Right.
But it would still be things that would reference some of the adventures that we saw Kirk and Spock and company on. Yes, Veronica.
But they could pull all the characters that are not on TOS into this. And you could have La'an and Mitchell and Ortegas and Mbanga, and they just all ended up on another ship together for whatever reason.
But if they're going to do all that, then just keep doing Strange New Worlds,
right?
You know,
yeah, they did a similar thing to that in the novel with the Vanguard series. That was on a space station that was concurrent with the original series, but it was more arc based. It was more modern. It was in like the 2000s. I would love something like that, but I don't think, like you said, I don't think that's something that what they want to do is Kirk and Spock and meeting the Tholians again, or whatever the case may be. Like they would love to do a remake of Space Seed. You know, like because Star Trek cannot get over Khan. Like I would imagine, like they would bring back Khan if they had the opportunity to do that. You know, like they can't resist that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mark says Tribbles destroy an entire starship in the short treks in Strange New World timeline, and once again, Kirk and Spock look like fools when they see a Tribble on the K7 space station.
Right. Yeah. Hard to argue with that.
That's true. That is true.
Yeah.
So, you know, the thing that kind of bothers me about this idea is that we've just finished a prequel.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't necessarily, first of all, I am not into the idea of carrying on into the TOS era, even with the same set of characters done with different blah, blah, blah.
Right.
I want Star Trek to get back to doing new things. I want new stories. I want new aliens. I want new monsters. I want new missions and a new crew. That's what I want. I don't want them to redo Enterprise. I mean, Enterprise the ship, not Enterprise the show.
Right.
I just don't need that. I think that this show needs to carry on the way it is up until the point where it's going to cross over into original series. And that's that. That is the end of that. And then we can move on to other things. We could even do more, I don't know, 24th century shows, but not Picard again. You know, let's do something new.
Do something between like Deep Space Nine and Picard.
Well, my ideal Star Trek would be just do what Next Generation did, jump 100 years after TNG with a new ship, a new crew, and you can bring back the random things you decide to bring back. But like you say, I mean, like with Next Gen, like the exciting things about Next Gen are not the Klingons coming back necessarily, but it's like the Borg, you know, or the exciting things about Deep Space Nine. It's fun when Kangkor and Koloss show up, but like the Dominion brings a lot more to Star Trek than bringing back the old stuff does, and the Cardassians and all that kind of stuff. 100%. And I wish that they could. I just don't know if like TV works that way now. You know, like media is so IP driven that I mean, I could see them saying like, no, like Kirk, Spock, and that this is where the money's at. Like we can't take a chance on creating something different.
Right. I got an amen from Mark.
Hey,
look at that. And he also says, how about Star Trek Legacy or that Star Trek medical series they teased us with? I've been talking about that Star Trek medical show for how long has this show been going on? 4.5 years. That's how long I've been talking about that. That is something I 100% want to see. I would like to see a Star Trek show set in a restaurant. I mean, let's have a comedy drama set in, you know, Cisco's or something. I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't care.
Yeah,
We
I'd be
want-
into any Star Trek show if it's good.
I
I'm not
mean,
as
yeah.
I'm not as hot on the legacy idea as a lot of fans are, because to me that's still pretty fan wanky, because it's like Captain
Yeah.
7 of 9 on a retro Enterprise with like everybody from TNG's kid, you know?
Right. The next generation.
Right. But I mean, really, what I would really love is, like you said, it's just for them to go out and find new adventures.
Right. Right.
And let the writers create something that we've not seen on Star Trek before.
Right.
That doesn't seem like what they're interested in doing.
I know.
So I don't know.
And we're kind of going to get that with Academy, except that, and because we do have a new set of characters that's coming in, and I think that's going to be the focus of that show. But you do still have legacy characters who are forming basically the faculty. And we will see them every episode, but I don't think they're going to be the focus of every episode. I think it's going to be this younger set of students, and they're going to have, like, their Hogwarts-esque adventures where they're in classes, but then something happens outside of class. They're learning how to be an officer. They're learning what Starfleet is about, but they also get up to these capers on the side. And I think that's a really exciting prospect.
Yeah.
I think that's something that has the potential to be both of the things that we're talking about. It can have the IP build from the characters that it's bringing over from an already existing show, 2 already existing shows, actually, and establish some new characters that are going to be doing new things and having new encounters. And I think that's a really, really great idea. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, that's the exciting thing to me about the 32nd century, and it has been since Discovery went there, is that it's the far future Star Trek, and they can play more with it.
Right.
And I do like that, like you mentioned legacy characters, and only one of them is from the old shows. We tend to think of the legacy characters as being from the 90s shows, but I mean, a lot of the legacy characters on Starfleet Academy have been introduced since 2017, which is kind of fun.
Exactly. It's like it's created its own legacy at this point.
Right.
Which is what it should be doing, but building on it and furthering it also.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm down with that whole idea. Let's see. Mark says, isn't Academy just a reworked Prodigy? Well, kind of, I guess.
I don't know. They sort of skipped over all the Academy stuff with Prodigy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was going to say, this is going to be more about the school stuff, or they're going to that's going to be a focal point, even if it's like they get up to shenanigans outside of school, but it's the school stuff that stuff that's happening at school that informs what they end up.
Well, at the very least, they spend at least some time at the Academy because they have a set for it,
right?
With instructors and so forth. With Prodigy, you had the kids just as rogues, and then they joined Starfleet and then became rogues again.
Yeah, basically. But these are kids that are enrolled in Starfleet Academy to learn about Starfleet, to become officers, where it was kind of an accidental process for the Prodigy kids.
Yeah.
And it was a way of introducing the basic tenets, the principles of what Star Trek is about to an audience who doesn't know, because they're being introduced to characters who don't know.
Right.
And that's not the case with the Academy characters. They are clearly familiar with what Starfleet is, and they're going to become that.
Right.
And, we're going to have a mix of characters. We're going to have one who's not going to be I think I remember reading this, or I made it up on my own head. We're going to have one that isn't going to be the one who excels at classes, because, not everybody can. Somebody's going to flunk out. You don't get to be on a starship just because you went to the Academy. You went to the Academy and you excelled. There's people who go to the Academy who don't excel, and I want to see that. I want to see that character, and I want to see a Boothby type of character, somebody who's not faculty, somebody who's a new character that has a relationship with these kids and can give them an education that's not a classroom education. You know, that's what I want. I think this show's got so much potential.
Yeah, I think so too. Did we want to take a quick break for a promo? And then, because we're about at the halfway point, and then we come back, I'd like to take a little look at sort of the idea of revisiting the original series and what we might do, or what we think the Strange New Worlds producers might do with the original series when we come back.
Okay. One thing I like to talk about is what I would do if I were showrunner.
Hi, I'm Gina Shock from the Go-Go's, fabulous drummer of the Go-Go's.
Hi, this is Tony Levin of King Crimson.
Hi, this is David Fishoff of the Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp.
Hi, this is Richard Evans. I am the author of Listening to the Music the Machines Make.
Hi, this is Teresa Kariakis, punk rock photographer.
Hi, I'm Tom Beaujour, author of Nothing But a Good Time, and you are listening to Modern Musicology.
Modern Musicology.
Modern Musicology.
You're listening to Modern Musicology, so, pay attention. You might learn something.
And we're back.
All right.
Yeah, one thing they've done and really leaned into on Strange New Worlds is this Gorn thing, right? They've taken the Gorn from one episode and built it out over sort of a series-long thing, right? Where presumably we're going to see more Gorn over the course of, not just this the premiere of season 3, but ongoing, I would think. But what other original series aliens do you think might be interesting to revisit? The first one that leaps to my mind is the Tholians, because they were a famous species from the original series that we saw just the once, and a smattering, like maybe just on Enterprise, I think since then.
Yes.
That you could do something cool with.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
The
go ahead.
one of the founding members of the Federation that is
Andorians?
No, the
No.
other Tellarites.
Tellarites, yep.
Okay.
I want to see more Tellarites.
Yeah.
Because didn't they have one of the kids in Discovery on that one episode where Tilly and they crashed, and wasn't he a Tellarite or partially Tellarite at least?
No, he was Tellarite, yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's, it's interesting you bring up Journey to Babel, because, you get Sarek and Amanda in Journey to Babel, and that's the only time they appear in the original series. Or, a revisiting of the original series, you might visit Sarek and Amanda more often. Right? Like, you could build out a longer arc with them. You already had those characters on Discovery. You already have actors in place who obviously they're not sitting by waiting, they're doing other jobs, but they could bring them back and really revisit Spock and his family in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me get a quick comment from Wayne, who says, if it is, this is back to Academy. If this is Academy that at least pretends to have a curriculum that trains cadets to be competent Starfleet officers. Yes, exactly.
Sure. I would love that.
Yes. So I'm going to have to think for a minute about your question.
Okay. I think, you've had characters from the original, like species from the original series that have been revisited since then. Like the Orions. I think like Lower Decks did a great job of fleshing out the Orions.
Yeah.
You could do more of that in the original series than they did originally on the original series. But so even take something like Journey to Babel, where you have this conflict where an Orion is posing as an Andorian, and you have this, political arc, and it all happens in like 55 minutes, right? Where you could stretch that out and make it over multiple episodes. That might be kind of fun.
Yes, exactly. That's the kind of thing that I would enjoy seeing. And I would kind of maybe like to see more about the Andorians. But, one of the things that I have enjoyed about Trek is that each series has kind of laid claim to a legacy race and developed them. And I think Enterprise did such a great job with the Andorians and their relationship with the Vulcans that maybe we could see something, how that played out. Because Enterprise, as everybody remembers, is a precursor to the original series. Let's see how things have gone from that point, from the foundation of the Federation, and how their relationships have progressed. And let's see a little bit of how that initial distrust has played out.
Yeah.
Because I don't want them to just, adopt the Andorians as like, here we're going to do the Andorians, because Disco did the Andorians too, but I just never thought they did it well,
right?
And they always look different. Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, we even had one of the actors on our show 2 times.
That's right.
Right. Yeah, like Discovery had Andorians, but really just as a species, not in the way that Enterprise did. Enterprise really dived into the Andorians in a different way.
Yeah.
But I would love like you, Frankie, you mentioned the Horta. I would love to see the Horta fleshed out. And I mean, because we talked about it on the show, where like the end of that episode is like, and now we're going to continue mining their planet and they're going to help us and everyone's happy. Like
that's not how that works.
Right. They could very well in another visit of the original series say like, no, get the F off our planet.
Right.
We're not mining for you.
Right. Hang on. I've got a couple of comments here. Mark suggests a Trelane versus Q scenario. And Wayne says, like, actually seeing more Andorian Starfleet officers.
Yeah,
I would love to see that.
Yeah, that's something you could do really across the board because, I mean, really, we had Spock and then everyone else in Starfleet is human.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. And you had like the Intrepid, which they mentioned is like manned by Vulcans. And Mirror, you had that one Vulcan bodyguard that sort of followed Mirror Spock around. But really, we haven't had any exploration aside from like the animated series and so on of like the original series with a more diverse cast than just humans, you know? And really, I mean, it was very white led. I mean, that's something they've done on Strange New Worlds is recasting some of like Mr. Kyle, for instance, with a man of Asian descent rather than just a white dude, where I mean, you could do more of that on a revisiting of the original series.
Now, this is not exactly original series. It's sort of adjacent because it's animated series, but I would like to see a Kaishan.
Yeah.
I would like to see something done with them a little bit. We know that this is also not at all, but we know that the Elarians were around for a good while before we met Guinan in Next Gen. So let's see what could be done with that. We know from Enterprise that the Denobulans are around. So let's see what we could do with the Denobulan, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be fantastic. And I mean, and then the preview for Strange New World Season 3, we saw there's an Adosian who's a bartender. Like you could bring back Mr. Erex in live action.
Please, let's have him.
Yeah.
Because even in animation, they never did as much with him as I always wanted to see.
Right. Yeah, I think there is potential there.
Sure.
I mean, and then something they've done in Strange New Worlds is like the George Kirk, right? And now they're visiting Roger Corby, like characters that are not iconic, that are just part of the tapestry of the original series that they brought back. That a character that I think that would be really interesting to revisit in a longer narrative would be Ben Finney, who had a history with Kirk. You know, he had a bitterness from Kirk. For those who don't remember Ben Finney, he was like a lieutenant and he was Kirk's like sort of mentor. And Kirk exposed when he was an ensign a mistake Ben Finney had made that put the ship in danger, and Ben Finney felt that it ruined his career. So he's a lieutenant on the Enterprise with a grudge against Kirk and stages this accident. But like they had been super close when they were young, and Ben Finney's daughter was named Jamie after James Kirk. Like they were that level of close, like where you name your daughter after your buddy, but then he's like, maniacally against this. All happens in the space of an episode. So I mean, I think that you could revisit a character like that has a history with Captain Kirk coming onto the ship. You discover that he has a grudge against him. You discover their history, and really you could build that out into a longer arc than just we discover this guy and that he's crazy and hates Kirk in the course of an episode. And they did a great job of that original series. I mean, Court Martial is a fantastic episode, but I think there's a lot of potential there that you could exploit.
I would enjoy seeing basically any of the Commodore / Admiral characters that we saw on the original in a new light. Let's see more about who they are. And instead of them just coming in and either, griping at Kirk or being the snot-nosed admiral who everybody hates and can't get along with and makes calls that the crew doesn't want to go along with. Let's see who these people are.
Right.
Outside of that one time that they were on the original.
Yeah. Well, like Commodore Stone, for instance, and I know Keith has talked about and wrote an essay about for our Commodore Stone for our book. That I mean, a character that would be great to build out. I mean, and it was something that I think was a hallmark of the original series. That the first time you meet a superior officer of Captain Kirk, it's a black man in 1966. It was huge, and I would love to see more about that character. I wish we would see Stone on Strange New Worlds, because he mentioned on the original series that he has been a Starfleet captain. Like that would be a great role to revisit now. I wish they would just do that. But if they were doing a revisit of the original series, I would love to see Stone built out into a more substantive character that was in more episodes.
Yes, 100%. Okay, new comments. My buddy Michael Phillips says, I'd prefer a new show with new characters telling new stories. Yeah, we've already covered that.
That's
know what we want to.
We want that too.
Yeah. I don't want a reboot of TOS. Maybe if the episodes are in between the TOS episodes, but not a true reboot. Yeah, I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, I don't, because I feel like it would be more jarring if they were in between, because they're not going to be consistent. Like, well, if you're going to remake the original series, just do it, because like for instance, Strange New Worlds, I already have problems with jiving with the original series. If they're trying to do an episode in between the episodes, it would be even worse for me.
Yeah, unless it's a different crew, different ship, different, telling similar stories at the same time. Mark says, I liked that Andorian Special Forces trooper that we got in Strange New Worlds flashback Klingon War episode. He had a Klingon knife on his belt. I want to see that story.
Okay.
That'd be cool.
Sure.
I mean, I love me an Andorian. So anytime you want to tell me an Andorian story, I'm there. I am all in.
Yeah. I will never say no to a story about Andorian Special Forces trooper.
That sounds so exciting.
Right.
Wayne says, actually, you and Charles say what I'm thinking much better than I do. Aw, shucks. Don't forget about all those planets that really deserve a second visit. Good point. Michael Phillips now says, also, it would be complicated. We'd have to call TOS the original series TOOS.
Right. The original series.
Exactly. That is so true.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point too. Like, what would they even call?
I know.
TOS 64. Is that when it came out?
No.
Okay,
66.
TOS 66.
But 64 is when they filmed the first pilot.
Okay, there we go. See, I'll
give you half a point for that.
like X-Men 97 or whatever it was called.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Now that's something they could do.
Right. Like, I would love it if they did the animated series continued. Star Trek 74 or 75.
Do it. Oh
Right.
my gosh, that'd be amazing.
Yeah. The trouble though is getting the original cast back. Obviously, it's Star Trek, the original series, you have a harder time of that. But I've said that before on the show. I would love if they were going to bring back Shatner, bring him back as like an animated Captain Kirk or Admiral Kirk or whatever the case may be, and do something in that style. Because I mean that style is popular. You have like Archer and things like that. You could do that, but they don't seem inclined.
Oh my god, a Starfleet themed Archer. Oh my god,
right?
And
with Admiral Kirk going on missions, I'd watch that.
No, have Captain Archer.
Oh,
just make it an Archer style show.
Okay.
Oh my god, I am onto something golden here.
You run with that, Keith.
That's Alan.
Whatever.
See, she's recasting me just
right. She's rebooting
just like
this
we're doing
as we
speak.
speak.
Exactly. We have now reached the silly part of the show.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the thing that's a struggle for me is that they look at it and think, oh, we should remake the original series again. Like surely they've got other, and he was probably being glib.
That's
right?
what I think too.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, Akiva Goldsman. Well, for one, if they hired him to make the original series, he would just do it. But
True.
I don't know. I mean, what are we imagining this show as a show or as like a streaming movie? Because frankly, if it's a streaming movie, it's going to be better than Section 31. They're going to already be on a better foot than they were with the last streaming movie.
That's true. I just hope that 31 didn't ruin our chances of getting more streaming movies, because I think it's a great idea. I think there's so much potential to do things with that they wouldn't be able to do with the series. Please give us more. Just do it better.
Yeah, I feel like we're approaching sort of the end of this era of Star Trek, and it's going to be sort of an end and a restart. Because I mean, I was listening to the TrekMovie.com podcast recently, and they were talking about the fact that, I mean, Alex Kurtzman's original contract is up in like a year, and you have new owners coming in. Like that would true. And Paramount Plus, like I just got a notification just recently that like the Paramount Plus with Showtime or whatever they're calling it is now being called Paramount Plus Premium. Like there's going to be some rejiggering.
Oh no.
I think with the new owners of Paramount Plus in general and probably other properties as well. I hope that they continue Star Trek in some capacity, but I wouldn't be surprised at all. And this is not a criticism of Alex Kurtzman, although there certainly are criticisms to be made of him. That if they came in and said, you know what, this is a good time to stop what we're doing and start fresh, I think would be kind of a natural thing. But I think just the stuff they have in the pipeline now, we're going to be watching through like 2017. And then after that, I'm interested to see what
2027?
Oh, yes, 2027. I don't know what decade I'm in, but yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they took this as a good time to sort of stop and start again. And I don't think that would be a bad thing necessarily. No, because and I don't hate the Kurtzman era like a lot of people do. I think there's a lot of good stuff that's come out of it, but I do feel like a lot of it's been hit and miss, and not all of it his fault. I mean, a lot of it through like the pandemic and stuff like that has been a struggle. But also the changing nature of streaming as we've been watching this over the past 10 years. But I am interested to see what they do next. I don't necessarily think that the original series, the reboot, is the way to go. I mean, I agree with the consensus here that let's just create a new Star Trek, right? Let's just create a Star Trek that people love. And that's something we talked about on the show before is like, in 30 years, what are they bringing back? The recasts of people from the original series, right? Like you've got to build new characters and new stories for people.
Exactly. It has to be Star Trek for another generation.
Right.
I almost said for the next generation, but no, that's too cliche. But it's got to be for a new age, you know? You've got to reinvent Star Trek to be whatever this next era of viewers needs it to be. And I don't know. I just feel like, that Akiva is really kind of talking way ahead of himself because as you say, and I do feel like when this merger finalizes, I think that we're going to, I 100% agree with you. I think we're going to see a closure on the ongoing projects that we have currently on the books, and they're going to start something new, and they may take a year off or 2 years off or something. And they're going to relaunch with a new vision, a new plan. And I'm fine with that. I think that Star Trek is just such a fertile property that, it's never going to go away. I just don't think it has really been, and it's like lately, I just think there's so much more potential for it to be great.
Right.
To be iconic, to be multi-generational, to be important. That's what I want.
Yeah, we were just talking recently about like that they want to broaden the fan base of Star Trek, right? And I hope they find a way to do that is still Star Trek, because that talk came out of the Section 31 movie, which to me wasn't Star Trek, and that's not something that I say often. Even Enterprise, as dire as it is, I think is Star Trek. I'm just teasing you.
I know you are.
But I think there is a way to bring more people into Star Trek.
Yes.
While still doing Star Trek, right?
Yes.
Like if you have to get Star Trek out of it to bring in new audiences, then maybe just give it a rest,
And the other thing that's kind of in play here too, which we haven't really talked about in a little while, is that new show that Tawny Newsome has been working on that hasn't officially been greenlit yet.
Right.
That's still up in the air. It's in development. It's being written, but they haven't gotten a go-ahead yet. And who knows? Maybe that isn't going to go anywhere. Maybe the new owners, whoever that may be, we assume it's a certain somebody, but it might not. No, who knows? But maybe they're not interested in that kind of thing. Right. Maybe that is stretching Star Trek too far for them. Maybe that's something that they would like to develop, but not right away. Maybe they want to start with their own vision and, their own way of making traditional Star Trek in a new way, but that's not what they want yet.
Right.
So maybe Tawny can take that to IDW or somebody and make it a, comic book series or something. I don't know.
Yeah, whatever they do, I hope that they figure out. I mean, obviously you need Star Trek on television. You need me, you need like a new Next Generation. Not don't do the Next Generation again or everybody from Next Gen's kids. But I mean, do what Next Generation did, where it reimagined Star Trek. And really, it took 40 plus episodes for them to figure out how to do it once they were on the air. But but figure out how to do a Star Trek for now that still feels like Star Trek, but in a new way. But I mean, also they got to figure the movies out,
100%.
Right. And I mean, I just read an interview recently where someone from the movie industry was saying that he thinks that like theatrical films have like 20 years at max left.
Oh my God.
Because of the way the industry is moving.
Oh.
But I would love them to, it's mind boggling to me that it's been 9 years and they can't figure out how to make a Star Trek movie and get it on the air and get it in the cinemas.
Yes. And that's something that I was going to bring up about 15 minutes ago. I was thinking that if they were to go ahead with this Akiva idea about, moving on up into the TOS era with a TOS based show, that means that if Star Trek 4 gets made, we will have 2 different TOS properties going on that are both competing with the original TOS 40, 50, whatever years ago.
Yeah.
What a I'm trying not to cuss. What a freaking mess that would be.
Yeah, but they do the same kind of thing with Superman and Spider-Man and Batman. Like if it was a superhero, it wouldn't be unusual at all to have 3 different versions of the same characters in a 20-year period.
Oh my God.
Like
I know.
I mean, that's that if they were to treat the original series like that, but then also, but like you can't do Batman's grandson being Batman and it'd be popular. Like if you're doing Batman, it has to be Batman. Right? Like I don't want Star Trek to be where it has to be the characters we've already seen in order for it to be successful.
I don't know. What was that Batman that was in the late 90s and it wasn't Bruce Wayne?
Beyond?
Batman Beyond, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Bruce Wayne was in it.
Barely.
He was the old man.
Barely.
Barely. He's in every episode.
He's barely in every episode. I don't know.
Right. But I mean, I
didn't watch it.
Right, but you can't expand Batman too far before it's not Batman anymore, right? Yeah. Like they're always going to go back to Bruce Wayne. They're always going back to Clark Kent. They're always going back to Peter Parker. And I don't want Star Trek to be that. I want Star Trek to move beyond Kirk and Spock and Cisco and Picard and Janeway and give me new characters.
Right, but also that's the exact reason why the Simpsons characters never age.
Right. Yeah,
because it's been 150 years of the Simpsons and their Lisa's still 8, and but that way you can watch it at any time, no matter who you are, what age you are, what decade you're watching it in, and you're going to get the same experience regardless.
Right.
Yeah.
And
now it's harder to do that with live action. You can't quite do it with live action.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that because literally last week I was at Universal Studios with my daughter and there's a Simpsons land and we were there and my daughter's recently graduated from high school. And I happened to mention to her that The Simpsons has been on so long that I wasn't allowed to watch The Simpsons when it was first on because I was too young.
That's right.
But I mean, you make a great point that I don't want Star Trek to be that.
Right.
Stagnant for 30 years. Right.
Yeah.
Like where people would be surprised if it changed. I really want Star Trek to reach beyond that. And I've sort of played devil advocate a bit in this episode, talking about what you could change and what you could do the original series. But I mean, really what I want them to do is what Strange New Worlds says in the title is to find strange new worlds, even though they do very little of that on the show.
Yeah. I mean, that is the key. My prime property is Doctor Who, and we have just come from a period where they have rehired a previous showrunner, a previous doctor, a previous companion, and it's the wrong way to go.
Right.
So I want to see Star Trek move forward. I don't care what era it's in. 32nd century, 24th century, 89th century, I don't care. Just move forward. Do new things. Actually go to the next frontier and do something new.
Yeah. And that's something we've talked about several times on the show is that, I mean, in the 8 years of this era of Star Trek, they've not introduced a memorable antagonist species. There's no new Klingon, Dominion, Borg. Like there's no, it's all revisiting something from the past or reimagining something from the
past. Yep. And if they do, it's a one-off and you're never going to hear from it again. Now, in answer to a previous question, another thing, and this is going to sound very familiar when I say this, because I've said it many, many, many times, and it's not necessarily a new thing, but Strange New Worlds has 2.5 years to give me Cybok. By God, I want Cybok.
Yeah.
Do something with that
They
character.
teased him. Like, what the frack?
Freaking teased him.
We saw the
Give
back of
me-
Cybok's head.
Right.
I want to see the
me-
front of his head. And Captain Angel, because Captain Angel is one of the most interesting new characters they've introduced.
What a great recurring character that should have been.
Right.
And possibly still can be. We don't know all of what's coming up in this season, but you know, certainly that would be something that if you were going to be doing that, you would put a hint of it in your trailer because you want people. I mean, because some of what we got in the trailer won't mean anything to us until we see the episodes.
Right.
But that means something to us because we know what it is. Anyway.
Right. And I get it if like the actor who plays Captain Angel, they haven't been able to get back. Right.
Yeah.
Like if the availability hasn't worked out. Sure. But Cybok has not been cast.
Right.
And you have like a crazy half brother of the main character.
Oh my
on
God.
the show. Like,
Why have we not done this?
Please do it. It's so good. It's perfect.
And I really want to flash back to Sarek's house with young Burnham, Spock, and Cybok.
Me too. Yes.
I just want to see them at dinner.
Absolutely.
That'd be hilarious.
All right. Well, anyone with any closing thoughts about this before we close it out?
I'm
Don't
excited
do it.
for Strange New Worlds to come out.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah, me too. We don't have a topic for next week.
That's
right?
not unusual.
No, that's very not unusual. But that's our last opportunity for the next 10 weeks to talk about any legacy topic. So I'm going to say, listeners, viewers, whatever, if you have a legacy topic that you would like to see us discuss next week, which after that, we will have 10 weeks of Strange New Worlds, throw it to us. Put it on our socials, email us,
Call us.
whatever. Call us. What's that number?
307-387-1701. Did I do it in the right order this time?
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah. And if you forget that, look at our Facebook group.
Yeah.
And we've got it pinned to the top. And if you have an interesting topic for us, we will play your voicemail at the top of the show.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Our buddy Bill says, Chuck, that dinner that sounds interesting and fun. Heck yes.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
All right. Alan, where can people find more of you?
CosmicCreative.com. KOZMIC Creative.com.
And how about us, Veronica?
FeltNerdy.com.
That's right. We've got a couple of library shows coming up in July. So follow FeltNerdy.com or Felt Nerdy across social media or Felt Nerdy and Dirty if you want to see what we're up to with our more adult content. And where else people find us?
Monkeying Around, a podcast about the monkeys.
That's right. And do you have a closing for us this week?
Live long and prosper.
Okay. Yeah, join Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern here on YouTube. We'll be talking about Star Trek, and that's also available after the fact on your favorite podcast platform. Live long and prosper, everybody.
See y'all later.